Well, today I'm looking at two different things, really. Thought I'd do a comparison between the Victrola 11 and the Silvertone. I'm not sure what model Silvertone this is, but I would guess this was competition at the time for the Victrola. You can see how similar they look. They are of similar height, similar style. Both have two spring motors. Obviously internal horns, although the Silvertone was never called a Victrola. Only a Victrola was called a Victrola because the Victor Talking Machine Company owned the copyright to that word. Now today, Victrola tends to be kind of a catch-all for any machine that has an internal horn. Not the case. There's only one Victrola. Those are the products of the Victor Company. Everybody else had different names. Sonora, Brunswick, Silvertone, and all the other companies out there, they were called by their names, not by the Victrola name. And you can see some differences right off the bat. One being, of course, immediately we notice that the Victor has two doors on the top here that cover the horn opening, while the Silvertone has a plate with a piece of cloth over it covering its horn opening. Now, the reason for this was the Victor Talking Machine Company owned the copyright to the design of sound doors. It would be running out right around this time. This machine is it's early 1917. This one around 1918, 1919, in there somewhere, maybe 1917. Victor still owned the copyright, and Silvertone did not have the right to use that copyright. They weren't paying Victor for it, so they couldn't do it. Them and a lot of other manufacturers couldn't do that. Columbia, of course, had the louvers, and that was also out. So most just opted for this cover panel here, usually pretty decorative like this one is, just to cover the horn opening so you don't just see a big opening there. Other than that, and of course there are no slats like you see. The Victor had the slats like this, kind of to disguise the opening a little bit, maybe direct sound a bit. Silvertone does not have that. They didn't have the right to use that either. That's also a Victor patent. That was the problem. Most of the off-brands, and Silvertone is one of the off-brands, even though Sears was huge and their buying power was enormous. They weren't Victor, they weren't Edison, they weren't Columbia, they weren't the top three, so they were one of the off-brands, of which there were hundreds between 1900 and 1930 making some form of phonograph, usually portables, but not always. There were many, many of them that came out with some form of upright phonograph floor machine, like this one. Usually the cabinets were made by a few cabinet makers. Pulley Manufacturing made this one for Silvertone. Victor, I believe, did make this one in-house. They didn't make all their cabinets in-house. This one they did. This was their most prolific seller. The Victor 11, they sold more of this model, than any other in the history of the company. This was the #1 seller. And then you had the Victor 9, the Victor 6, and so on behind that. You know, the very high sellers too, and the 16 eventually. Pulley Manufacturing made this one, and you can see the obvious differences. Pulley made cabinets early on for Victrola. The very earliest VTLAs, the Victrolas, they had the Pulley manufactured cabinets. But look at the similarity here. They have the same flare here. Victor does not have the more Gothic carvings here that Silvertone used. You can see it's just plain, understated plain. Both are mahogany, but this is in the standard red mahogany. I guess it's a standard A finish you can get on a Victrola. Victrola had a wide range of finishes, even on the 11. You could have gotten this in oak, this one too. Fumed mahoganies, fumed oak, golden oak, all different kinds of colors they could do to the wood. But basically you had your choice of oak and mahogany. I believe it was the same for Silvertone. I don't think they had a wide range. Once you started getting into the Victrola 14 and 16, all that, then you had a lot more wood choices, some very exotic woods out there. Eventually the 11, and I believe in this year, the 11 could be had in walnut also. I don't believe that was an option for the Silvertone. But you see the similarities. They both have a lid lock, which is probably the same lock. Now this came standard in early 1917, standard with the Exhibition. Many were later, Exhibition reproducer, many were later upgraded to the #2 or even later to the #4. While the Silvertone had its own, I don't know who made that reproducer for Silvertone, whoever manufactured these for Silvertone. Pulley made the cabinet. Sal made the motor. It's a Sal AA 2-spring motor in there. I don't know who made the rest. I didn't do that much research on it. Roughly the diaphragm in that reproducer it matches up to a Victrola number 2. So basically you're getting very similar performance to the Victrola number 2 out of this reproducer a year or so before Victor came out with it. But, you know, there's other differences too, but that's a big one there. They both have coffin-shaped lids. Obviously one has the Victor logo, while this has a Silvertone, the medallion on there that is a brass medallion that's set into the wood. It is not a water decal. They both had record storage down below in the shelves, as you can see. This has been emptied because this machine is shortly going to be going to a new home, which is why I'm making this video now, while we have them side by side to compare them, and also for some information for the new owner on how to use the Silvertone phonograph. Now, on this, that fabric back there is actually felt. It's the only color I could really find that was close to what they used in there. It was a purple fabric. I just didn't have access, like a velvety looking purple fabric, typical of the 20s and the late teens. But this is what I had, so this is what I used. It does have a slight muting effect, very slight, when you're during playback, and this actually just pops right off. I don't know if I can do it with my fingernail, but maybe. I might have to get a little screwdriver or something in there, and I can show you that. Well, I'll show it to you later when it's playing. Now, what's this on here? This is a stroboscope disc. See it? I've probably shown these before, but this is what you use to set the speed on a phonograph, set the speed to 78 RPM. This is a 60-cycle stroboscope disc, which means it's made to work with an incandescent light bulb of the old style. That's the one that had the old filament in it, not the LEDs or fluorescence. Got to have a 60-cycle bulb to use these. Basically, when the turntable is spinning and the stroboscope disc looks just like that, you see the black lines like it's not even moving, that is then set to 78. Now, these speed controls do not have numbers on them. There's no little 78, no little arrow. Right about there is where I figured 78 should be, so that's where I set it. Now, on the Victor, it's very similar actually. Except the Victor does have a 78 on it. Now, was that a Victor patent? I don't know. Possible, because they had so many of them. Another Victor thing that is a Victor patent is that speed, that auto stop there. You see the auto stop? Victor had that. They had it pretty early, actually, but way back around 1911 or 1910, around there somewhere. That became, well, actually, I'm not sure of that. I found them on Victrolas that old. Doesn't mean that the patent goes back that far. I'll have to look into that. But in any event, it was definitely a Victor patent, and you'll find that on Victor machines. But there is no such on the Silvertone. The Silvertone does have something the Victor does not have, though. That is a rudimentary sound control right here. This little thing that comes in and out is basically actuating a little door that closes off under here to shut off the sound or mute it if you want to. In, the sound is wide open. Out, the sound is closed. You'll still hear it, but the sound is muted somewhat. Over here we have the needle cups. These are metal needle cups, and they're made for 3 different types of needles, and there are different needles for different Victrolas. Are there any in there? No. You have your low tone, your mediums, and your highs. You're basically small, medium, and large. The physical size of needle is small, medium, and large. The small ones mute the tone somewhat, like you're playing, say, something from the late 30s or the 40s. The electrically recorded records will tend to boom on a Victrola when you're using a big needle, or these Silvertones. Antique phonograph, let's say. So what you want to do is use the lower tone, the smallest needle you can. It also kind of mitigates your record damage a little bit there too, because you will eventually damage the later records by playing them consistently with steel needles and heavy reproducers. They're not really made for that. And your loud ones are, of course, on a Victrola era record, you could use all 3. It doesn't make a difference what you do on those ones. And of course, fiber needles are also an option. Fiber needles do not wear your records. And you can reuse them. The only Victrola needle that can be reused is a fiber needle. You use a nipper, and you nip the, not the dog, it's a sharpener. It's basically a needle sharpener. You stick the needle in, and it puts a new point on it. Each new point will play 4 to 6 records before you start to notice the sound degrading, And all you got to do is just re-nip it until there's nothing left of the needle. You throw the nub away and get another needle, another fiber needle. A little hard to find these days, but they do turn up on eBay if you choose to use one. Maybe you could use that little cup over here for those. It gives you 4. Well, Victrola only gave you 2 on this model. The 16 gave you 3, but this is 2. There and there, and in the middle you had your spent needle cup, something that Silvertone does not give you. Is that a Victor patent? Possibly. Don't know. Or maybe they gave you something else you could use. I really don't. I did not look into that. This plate back here once had a special attachment on it that would allow you to play the lateral cut records. These are they're vertical cut. Oh, wait a minute, I got that wrong, didn't I? This plays lateral cut records. That's side to side, like this. Needle's moving like this. The vertical, the needle moves up and down in the groove, like this. There was an attachment back here that would allow you to just swap out, see that little screw there? You could pop this off, pop another attachment on there to turn this like this, and then you could play those lateral cut records. Not an ideal way to play lateral cut records, by the way. Those are meant to be played like, say, the Edison Diamond Disc. Should only really be played on an Edison Diamond Disc player because they use a special sapphire-tipped needle on their stylus to play those records that did not cause wear. You can wear the Edison records on a machine like this. So you shouldn't. I mean, there's thousands and thousands of titles available, you know, in lateral cut records, not the vertical. So you can play those. Both of them have, this is your stop right there. That's your break. It's on now. Victrola has pretty much the same exact thing. There's no difference really in them. They're exactly the same thing. They didn't change much. Your motor board is held down by 4 screws. These screws, once removed, will allow the motor board to lift off. Now, this one just lifts right off the machine straight up. And the turntable comes off by lifting it straight up also. The turntable without the motor board. With the Victor, you just take 2 screws and it just pivots up like this. Like a door. There's a hinge in there. Pivots up and you can oil your motor, grease your motor, which periodically does need to be done. Most specifically oiling rather than greasing. Greasing once in a while, oiling more frequently, like your friction leather, for instance, should be oiled quite frequently. I would say if you play the machine a lot, once a month. And here we have your crank. Oh, first, we're going to put the crank in. I'll show you how to do that. This is the crank. This is the one used by the Silvertone. This is a male crank. Some are female on different machines, which just means they slide over. Instead of the threads being on the crank, they are on the motor, and you're sliding right over on them. Your escutcheon is over here. You just slide it straight in until you feel it hit something, and then you turn it, and it threads in. Putting a little oil here now and then is a good idea too. Okay, now it's in there. You're going to want to crank it. And it's going to be very easy. Every machine is different. With a Sal AA, it's a pretty easy crank. But you do have to crank it a lot. There are 2 springs in there you're cranking, remember, not 1. And it's very smooth. You know, it's not really hard. You're not cranking a Model T here. You know, it's not like you're turning over an internal combustion engine. You're just winding it up, and you'll feel it get tougher as you go on, as it starts to build resistance and the spring's tight. And right there, you start to feel a lot of resistance. You stop, and you gently let the crank back. Now you're done. You're wound. You should be good. 2, 3, 4. It depends how many plays you get. A lot of it depends on the records, how long they are, how worn they are. Now we're going to check the speed and see if it's set to 78. The camera should be able to show this. Okay, we're slightly off. You see that? See how it seems to be moving? Okay, I'm going to turn the needle a little bit. And notice how now it seems to be staying still. And that's where it's set at, right there. See if I can get close so you really see that. Okay, we're not moving. Those lines are straight. That is how you use a stroboscope disc. 60 cycle with a regular incandescent light bulb. Okay, to stop it, we slow it down, apply the brake. And we get a record. All right. Let's see, what did I have on the other machine? How about the Jackass Blues? I've played that before, we'll play it again. It's instrumental, and a lot of times when I play vocals on a record, they get a copyright infringement thing there. There's nothing for me, but it just means they're going to put advertising on the video. The copyright holder can do that on YouTube. So a lot of times I will use just an instrumental. Most of those, for some reason, don't seem to trip the copyright regulations or whatever. The copyright Nazis or whoever's on there. Okay, now we need a needle. You can see, for convenience purposes, I'm using one of my needle cups. And I am using a loud tone needle. That's the biggest one. Now to put these on is a little more difficult than it is in a Victrola. With a Victrola, the reproducer has this elbow and you can pivot it up and you just put your needle in easily, thumb screw down, and then boom. Now, this is a Victor patent. So, obviously they couldn't do that for this tone arm. So what you have to do, I'll put the camera down here for a second, a little bit awkward to try to do it one-handed, so, alright. We pivot it up. And what do we see there? Same thumb screw. Slip the needle all the way in. Don't stab yourself doing this. Slip the needle all the way in, and you turn the thumb screw until it's snug. Do not, don't do that. Just snug it, that's all. It's got to hold the needle firmly, but not that tight. Okay, put this over here. It's not going to go down far enough to hit the wood. Just rest it there for a minute. Some phonographs usually even put a little block of felt there so you can do that. You can get some and put it there too. Silvertone didn't do that. That wasn't part of their design. Okay, then turn it on. Let it build up speed till it's full speed. There we go. And now, right there on the, whoops, don't do what I did. Right there on the edge of the record, there's a blank spot. You put it there, move it until it contacts the first groove. And when the record comes to an end, that eccentric, by the way, was made to trigger an auto stop that neither one of these machines has, although it will trigger the one on there. That's for a different style. slow it, apply the brake. Now, some people would like to do is it, and I recommend it too, when you're done playing the machine at the end of your session, day, whatever, you're not going to play it anymore today, what you want to do is just let it run down. Just let it run down until it stops. Don't have to do it any further than that. You shouldn't ever do it any further than that. And that's all. Don't leave it under tension for a long period. A little tension is not going to hurt it, but you don't want it fully wound for a long period of time. Now, of course, as the rule goes, it is one play per record. We just played the record. What do we do now? We take off the needle, which is not hard to do. Just lift it up, loosen the thumb screw, pull it out, pull the reproducer over there, and then we take the spent needle over to the Victrola, because the Victrola has a spent needle tin, and we put it in there. Or you could just put a little cup there, or even use one of these cups for spent needles. But remember which one is the spent ones, which ones are the good ones, the new ones. You don't want to mix them up. Now, we still have a lot of power on this spring, so why don't we play the other side of this, which is, I don't even remember what it is. Up and at 'em! Okay. We'll play it. This record's got a little bit of wear to it, but that's all right. A lot of my records do, that I use for testing purposes like this. This is just something I had kicking around, and I used it for this. Okay. You might also notice that this reproducer is nickel-plated and not gold-plated. The reason for that is this reproducer, along with the entire tone arm here, is pot metal. And pot metal has a tendency to split, swell, and crack with age, which is what happened to the original reproducer. I was lucky enough to score some parts, amongst them an identical reproducer, but for one of the regular Silvertone machines, you know, like a tabletop or something like that. And it was nickel-plated, along with this little elbow, which was also damaged. But now, they're good. It was a very good mix of pot metal used in this, because as you can see, it's really not in bad shape. It's not showing blistering or anything like that. Anybody that's ever seen a Victrola number 4A reproducer knows what I mean about swelling and cracking pot metal, or a Columbia tone arm. This is not swollen, it's not binding, it's not cracked, you know, but it is delicate. You know, you can crack it because its internal structure is definitely going to be compromised by advanced age. This machine is over a century old. It's 104, I think it is. Okay. And you see what I did there with the sound door and all that stuff in there, by the way? Those were all the treasures that fell down inside this machine that I found when I took it apart. And there we go. The basic operation of a Silvertone phonograph. Really, there's nothing to it. Yeah, they're pretty easy machines, like any of these older phonographs are to use. They all operate pretty much the same way. They all have their little quirks, you know, like different types of sound control or whatnot. Now, why don't we play that same song on the Victrola and see if it really sounds any different. I don't think it does, but maybe that's all we really need. Maybe the camera will pick up something I don't hear. Okay. Same thing, you know, with a Victrola. Put the needle, put the record on there. Let's get the stroboscope disc out of the way, and we need a needle. And I put the needle cup over there. Okay. Actually, I do have actual needles in the regular cup here. Same ones. Again, snug. Don't over tighten them. Just snug. They just have to hold the needle in there firmly. They don't need to be, you know, impact tightened or anything like that. Now this has the sound control. Not the sound, I'm sorry, I keep saying that. It has the speed control, basically. Just loosen it a little bit, turn it that way. Now you hear it stop. Okay, now you're just going to move it until it gets to, let's say, right about there. I think that's good. It should stop there. Okay. Oops, leaning against it. There we go.